And we didn't. It wasn't that kind of trip. But we decided we'd better go and buy some. And so we went into the streets of Shanghai trying to buy some condoms. And I just want to read you a little passage about this. The Friendship store seemed like a promising place to buy condoms. But we had a certain amount of difficulty in getting the idea across. We passed from one counter to another in the large open-plan department store, which consists of many different individual booths, stalls, and counters, but no one was able to help us. We first started at the stalls which looked as if they sold medical supplies, but had no luck. By the time we got to the stalls which sold bookends and chopsticks, we knew we were onto a loser, but at least we'd found a young shop assistant who spoke English. We tried to explain to her what it was we wanted, but seemed to reach the limit of her vocabulary pretty quickly. So I got out my notebook and drew a condom very carefully, including a little sort of extra balloon on the end. She frowned at it, but still didn't get the idea. She brought us a wooden spoon, a candle, a sort of paper knife, and surprisingly enough, a small porcelain model of the Eiffel Tower. And then at last lapsed into a posture of defeat. Some other girls in the stall gathered round to help, but they were also defeated by our picture. At last I plucked up the bravado to perform a delicate little mime. And at last the penny dropped. Ah, the first girl said, suddenly wreathed in smiles. Ah, yes. They all beamed delightedly at us as they got the idea. You do understand? I asked. Yes, yes, I understand. Do you have any? No, she said, not have. Oh, but. Yes. I say you where you go, okay? Oh, thank you. Thank you very much, yes. You go 616 Nanjing Road, okay? They have there. You ask Rubber Over, okay? Rubber Over? Rubber Over. You ask. They have. Okay, have a nice day. She giggled happily about this with her hand over her mouth. We thanked them again profusely and left with much waving and smiling. The news seemed to spread very quickly around the store, and everybody waved at us. They seemed terribly pleased to have been asked. When we reached 616 Nanjing Road, which turned out to be another smaller department store and not a knocking shop we'd have been expecting, our pronunciation of Rubber Over seemed to let us down and produce another wave of baffled incomprehension. This time I went straight for the mime that had served us so well before. And it seemed to do the trick at once. The shop assistant, a slightly more middle-aged lady with severe hair, marched straight to a cabinet of drawers, brought us back a packet, and placed it triumphantly on the counter in front of us. Success, we thought. Opened the packet and found it to contain a bubble sheet of pills. Right idea, said Mark with a sigh. Wrong method. We were quickly floundering again as we tried to explain to the now slightly affronted lady that it wasn't precisely what we were after. But by this time, a crowd of about 15 onlookers had gathered round us, some of whom I was convinced had followed us all the way from the Friendship store. One of the things you quickly discover in China is that we are all at the zoo. If you stand still for a moment, people will gather round and stare at you. The unnerving thing is they don't stare intently or inquisitively. They just stand there, often right in front of you, and watch you as blankly as if you were a dog food commercial. At last, one young and pasty-faced man with glasses pushed through the crowd and said he spoke a little English, and could he help? We thanked him and said, yes, we wanted to buy some condoms, some rubber overs, and We'll be very grateful if you'd explain that for us. He looked puzzled. Picked up the rejected packet lying on the counter in front of the affronted shop assistant and said, "Not want rubber over, this better." "No," Mark said, "we definitely want rubber over, not pills." "Why want rubber over? Pill better." "You tell him," said Mark. "It's to record dolphins," I said. Or not the actual dolphins, in fact. What we want to record is the noise in the Yangtze, that it's to go over the microphone, you see, and, "Oh, just tell him you want to f*** someone," said the sound recorders, "and you can't wait." But by now the young man was edging nervously away from us, suddenly realizing that we were dangerously insane and should simply be humored and escaped from. He said something hurriedly to the shop assistant and backed away into the crowd. The shop assistant shrugged, scooped up the pills, opened another drawer, and pulled out a packet of condoms. We bought 9, just to be safe. So a couple of days later, we were standing on the banks of the Yangtze on a very desperate, drizzly, grey day, and we put the microphone in this little sort of pink thing and dropped it into the water. And now I don't usually do impressions, but I'm going to do for you an impression of what it sounds like under the surface of the Yangtze River, and it's something like this. The Yangtze River, ladies and gentlemen. And you suddenly realize what an appalling thing we had inflicted on these poor animals that lived in a world of super sensitive sound and hearing. And this was why these animals were now desperately endangered, because having removed one way of life from them, we were now removing a second. The problem is we're about to remove a third. I said that when I was there, it was 10 years ago, there were 200 of these left. Today there are 20. And because the Chinese are building these giant dams to dam the Yangtze at one of the most beautiful and spectacular sites in all the world, the Three Gorges, and they're damming it there, which means that the Yangtze dolphin will at that point definitely go extinct. And it's terribly sad. The peculiar thing about dams is that we keep on building them and none of them ever do any good. It's not quite true, because unfortunately there are, in the history of dam making, 2 that did work. One is the Hoover, and the other is the one up in the Pacific Northwest, the Coolidge Dam. And every other one doesn't work. And for some reason, we never managed to be able to quite stop us. We always think we'll just build one more. I think we must have some sort of beaver genes deep in our... but the sad thing, as I say, is that the Yangtze River dolphin is definitely and without doubt bound for extinction. And it's very peculiar to me that we are living at the moment in an extraordinary age, an extraordinary renaissance, because we have got to the point where we suddenly understand the value of information, which you never had before. And we call the age we live in that of information. And we've discovered that information is the most valuable resource we have. And